So hello everyone, new students and returned to the start of the Certified Technical Trainer short course facilitated by IT Masters and Charles Sturt University, or CEFU, and presented by the handsome devil that was just on your screen, your mentor for the next 4 weeks, Steve Zobrist. We're excited about working with Steve again for the first time in a few years, I believe. All webinars for this course will be held at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And this first one will cover an essential aspect of technical training, planning prior to the course and what that entails, as well as a brief overview of the CTT Plus exam. Before handing over to Steve, I think an introduction to both IT Masters and CSU is in order, as well as a bit of housekeeping and a word on how to get the most out of the functionality of the GoToWebinar platform. So we'll start with who are IT Masters and CSU and why are we running these courses for free. IT Masters is a training organisation that exists solely as a partner to CSU. We work with CSU to create and deliver a number of their Masters courses, and we also market those courses on their behalf. We think the best way to do that is to give some of it away for free and hope that if we do a good enough job, some students will enrol in the full Masters courses. That said, this 4-week course will stand alone on its own right. We want you to learn some useful information, have some fun, hopefully make connections with your fellow students on the forum pages, and assuming you pass the exam at the end of the course, you'll get a certificate of achievement that isn't contingent upon anything else. We don't expect you all to come and sign up for the Master's degrees at the end of the course. If you come away thinking that CSU is a university that's doing some good things and you've got something out of the course, then we think that's just a win-win. Tonight also we have James on hand in a technical support role. He's here just in case there's any technical issues in class tonight. He's also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, or the Moodle page, which is where you'll find all the other materials you need for the course, readings and discussion forums. I highly recommend you have a look at that page and sort of play with the functionality of that one. And if you have any questions tonight or later on, feel free to contact us. Next week, a representative of CSU will come along to talk more in depth about the full Masters courses. I'm sure you'll all have plenty of questions about those. So if you do have questions, hold out for a week and hopefully that presentation will answer those. But if you do have any questions, just in the meantime about technical issues, about short course issues or about the Masters issues, feel free to email shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au. Just a word on the GoToWebinar functionality. If you have any questions during Steve's presentation, we're more than happy to field them. You might be able to see your chat screen. There's a bunch of questions that have already come through. I'll be answering as many of those as I can via text throughout the presentation. That'll hopefully sort out any minor issues. And if there's any really interesting questions, I'll save them over until there's breaks in the presentation, and address those to Steve for you. And then at the end, if there's a bit of time left over, we'll have a bit of question and answer session, or if there's something that's particularly relevant, I'll just interject while Steve's talking and we'll get into it straight away. Just one last thing I can think of, and that would be if you're having audio problems on GoToWebinar, our only real advice and our only really way to address the issue is just log out and log back in again. We can't do much from our end. It's more than likely just an audio issue on your end. So without much further ado, I guess I'd like to introduce Steve and say thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Guy. Greatly appreciate it. Hello everyone, and welcome to the CTT Plus short course. Now this short course will help you prepare for the Certified Technical Trainer CTT Plus industry certification from CompTIA. Something to keep in mind is that this is a vendor-neutral certification. It applies in many areas of technical training. It's not just limited to IT type of training. So we're going to hit quite a number of points for technical training that you may want to apply if you're a current trainer or even if you're just starting out. So just a little bit about myself. I began as a formal trainer while in the military, focusing on things like map reading, navigation, and how to keep from getting lost, and some other areas. I was also a scuba diving instructor for the YMCA, as well as the CMAS, and where part of the instruction included teaching a little bit of physics, a bit of chemistry, And probably the most important rule of all while underwater, don't hold your breath. Make sure you breathe. All of my students came through with flying colors. Now, I began training in the IT world around 1990 or so and obtained my Certified Novell Instructor or CNI certificate in 1994. And I got my Microsoft Certified Trainer MCT in 1998. And finally, my CTT Plus in 2001. So I've been teaching in the classroom since about 1990, as I mentioned, and in the virtual classroom, especially with IT Masters here, since about 2008. So more on a personal note, I love to travel. I love to ski, hiking, of course, and there's always the scuba diving portion, as I mentioned before. Now, some things about you, which I hope applies to you. Since you're here, I assume that you enjoy teaching, and especially teaching complex ideas and topics to other people. All right, so with our introductions out of the way, grab a beverage of your choice and let's get started. Let's take a look at, or let's talk about the exams here that you will need to take from CompTIA if you're going to get your CTT Plus certification. Now, during these sessions, we're going to introduce you to the CTT Plus exams and assist you in preparing for the exams. Now, I'm going to be using my experience as a trainer from Microsoft and Novell Technologies, as well as A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and Microsoft applications and databases, etc. My background, of course, is from the IT world, but I'll try to throw in some other analogies and references to other technologies as well. Now, again, these are only examples and don't reflect what is on the exam, which focuses on more the theory of training rather than the actual technical content of what you're going to have in your course. For example, if you're going to be presenting PMP type of information, or if you're a trainer for Microsoft and so on, each of those will have specific content for those areas. What we're going to be looking at more is focusing on the theory of the training. So this prerequisite for this course includes a recommended level of 12 months of training experience. Now, of course, you should also enjoy training, the training environment in general, as well as getting a bit out of your comfort zone. Now, 2 exams are required for the CTT Plus certification. Now, the first one is the TK201, which is a computer-based exam with 95 questions in 90 minutes. A passing score of 655 out of 900 is required to pass this exam. Now, a lot of people ask, well, how long does it take to grade the exam? Assuming you're on taking a computer-based exam, it will take all of less than 5 seconds. So it's very, very rapid. You'll find out your results effectively right away. Now, the TK201 is followed by either the TK202 or the TK203 assessments. The TK202 assessment is for the CTT Plus Classroom Trainer designation. And a submission of a video for a classroom training session needs to be evaluated and scored, and that goes off to CompTIA. The TK203 assessment is for the CTT Plus Virtual Classroom Trainer designation. And a submission, again, of a virtual classroom training session from you needs to be evaluated and scored as well. The assessment for these two, the 202 and the 203, is a 17 to 22 minute video that you make where a passing score of 36 out of 48 is required. So with these requirements in mind, let's put a quick poll on which assessment area you will be targeting, either the classroom trainer or the virtual classroom trainer. Guy, would you please put up the poll for me? And we'll wait a few minutes and post the results. Okay, with the testing and assessment goals out of the way, let's move on to the exam domains. These are the 5 domains you will be tested on for both written and the video exams and assessments. We'll cover each of these 5 domains the following weeks, and I also encourage you to refer to the references as well, as they can assist you with ideas and suggestions. Please remember that, as I mentioned before, the exam and assessments are not focused on any particular technology like Microsoft or Cisco or PMI and so on. The exam is vendor neutral, but the skill set you learn as a trainer can be applied in many areas. All right, maybe a bit quick, but Guy, could you post those results on what people are interested in taking, which exams they're interested in taking? Okay.
Has that worked?
I don't see it on my end, which doesn't mean a whole lot.
Okay. Okay, well I've shared it, and we've got 48% classroom trainer, 37% virtual classroom trainer, and 15% not planning on taking the exam.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's going to be more classroom trainers by a little bit than the virtual trainers. Very interesting. I love both of them, and we'll discuss my likes and dislikes about each one and maybe the strong points and weak points of the different areas a little bit later on. Cool. Thank you, Guy. Appreciate that.
No worries.
All right. Now, let's hit a few highlights about the Essentials exam. That's the TK201, the written exam. First of all, as I mentioned, the focus is how to train adults on technical topics and not focused on teaching children or general education, although there may be some overlap with educational pedagogy. There is a difference between lecturing, telling, and teaching, which we should understand. We should also recognize characteristics of good instructors and how people learn when you teach and overcome challenges in the classroom and over the internet. We've got some examples we'll take a look at as well too. Some are my pet peeves, some of the ones that I've run into, some of them I haven't run into, fortunately. I'll talk about a little bit about those. Now to this end, we'll need to be a bit familiar with learning theories and how to engage with the learners and manage the classroom and recognize different learning styles. And there's several different types of learning styles we do have to be aware of. Now keep in mind that while you may be good at passing examinations, it does not necessarily mean you can teach. Now I don't mean you directly, I mean in general. I found this. I remember hiring contractors for some courses. Although they are really highly skilled in the areas that I hired them for, they sometimes lack the training skills needed to convey their knowledge to the learners. And these were very highly technical courses and really needed someone to relate with the students. And that in some cases it just didn't quite happen as well as I'd hoped. So part of your assessments will be on how to create a learner-centered environment and engage the learners in the material. And there's a couple of ways that we can do this, and we're going to address them as the course plays out. Now, of course, the end goals here is to help you become a better instructor. So for each class, you need to bring a few things. You need to bring your knowledge, you need to bring your confidence in the material, your ability to engage with the learners, and probably one of the most important things that really helps, bring a sense of humor. It really helps an awful lot in a lot of situations. All right, now, quick question for all of you. What technical training courses are you interested in giving? Now, there is a poll for this. Guy, if you could pop that up. I do apologize. I had to limit the choices, so I'm sorry if your specific area isn't really mentioned. Guy, could you bring that poll up for people to fill in?
That poll's up now. Just to play with the functionality of it, I might make myself a presenter and show my screen.
Okay.
See if that helps.
As I mentioned, I did have to limit this to just a couple of selections. So if you're not in the information technology or project management, etc., if you just go put in other, and that'd be great. It's always interesting to find out what people are interested in training.
Right, well, we've got a fairly conclusive answer. Can you see it, Steve?
No, I can't see the answers right now in presentation mode.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, I'll close this one now. We have
74%. My apologies, I do have it here. So we got 74% information technology, 13% in project management. We do have some manufacturing industrial. That's a lot of fun also. I mean, all these areas I think are pretty cool. 10% in others. So an overwhelming amount in information technology. All right, great. Thank you for that.
No worries.
Thanks, Guy. All right, so this is our breakout for our 4 weeks and roughly follows the CompTIA CTT Plus domains. Now, each session is going to be between 40 and 60 minutes in length, depending upon what we need to cover. So that gives you a little bit of what you can plan around for your evenings or afternoons, what have you, depending upon what part of the world you're from.
Sorry, Steve, just to interrupt. We're not seeing anything now that we've got your screen back up in terms of the slide.
Oh, all right. Well, it's a good thing I didn't move to different slides then. There, how's that?
Great, back up.
Cool, all right. All right, as far as materials, some of these materials are published on our course site, includes videos and websites you may want to review. Some of the videos are pretty humorous, but they're also pretty much to the point too. Now as well, you may want to also look at the CTT Plus exam guide put out by Joseph Phillips. It's available from Amazon. It's an easy to read book that is short and really to the point. It does also give you a lot of sample questions and so on. Now this book is not required for this short course. It's that you might want to use it as a reference later on if you decide that you need more information for the exam, the assessments, and some other ideas. With the background administration side of things completed, let's get started on our next topic, planning prior to the course. Okay, our objective during this part of the session is to address the following areas: evaluating the learner, determining learner objectives, review the ADDI model, and managing the course. Now as an aside, Albert Einstein made a lot of interesting observations, and I like this quote as it really encapsulates what an ideal trainer should be able to do. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. There's a difference between education and training, which I mentioned earlier, and using CompTIA kind of as a guide. Education addresses broad goals of knowledge transfer with the intent to direct or influence the course of a person's life. Now, think about this. Think about when you were in primary school or middle school or high school. Broad skills were taught, such as science and languages and arts and music and so on. And we are often introduced to critical thinking, evaluating, and, well, from my perspective, learning how to learn. Training, on the other hand, focuses on the skills, the tools, and the competencies to help people complete their roles in an organization. This is where you come in. Training people to use a software package, using new technology, or applying new business methodologies. So I hope you can kind of see the difference about when we were all going to school, primary, middle, high school, and what all the teachers were throwing at us and all these things, versus when you went to a training course. How it was really focused on being able to do something well. So this whole technical training helps build a framework to apply technologies to our lives and careers, and we're trying to convey this to the students. Now, we need to determine why the training is needed. How do we do this? Well, a good place to start is to determine and define the learning objectives. Okay, well, how do I define the learning objectives? I just make them up, right? No, maybe another place to start would be speaking with the managers. What about the participants themselves? What do they need to learn? Get the input from organizational leaders. You might also want to review the course objectives with stakeholders and confirm that the course is what the course is supposed to have, and sometimes even just as important, what the course should not have in it. So we're also going to need to determine the learning needs. And are there skills gaps? Maybe people are at one level and they know this set of skills, but they need to make that jump to another skill set. What's the gap in between? How do we jump that? Is there a desired competency to be attained? And what's supposed to be the end result? This is something that I always like to look at, is what do they want the students to be able to do? What's the learner supposed to be able to do at the end of it? So a very important thing to do is to be sure to meet up with the learners. I've found it's really surprising on the gap between what the learners want and what the managers want. Sometimes they don't quite even out, or sometimes they don't quite meet as much as you would have thought. So you also want to check how the technical topics are going to be used. And what do the learner needs, or is this what a person needs to know to do for the tasks required for their role in the organization? Now, something that can also help is creating course prerequisites. This is often a challenge to establish and to enforce. I know this from being a technical trainer. You've got a bit of a conflict here sometimes. Let me explain this a little bit more here, and we'll come back to that. Now, what we want to do is be able to create prerequisites and establish the knowledge boundaries without delaying the progress of the overall course, or the class rather. And our challenge should be to enforce these prerequisites before the learners even enroll in the seminar or the course, because otherwise they're unprepared, and the unprepared learners can impact the other learners. Here's a case in point. Your objective is to train the people as well as possible. Your ability to do that is based upon all of the learners having met the prerequisites. But you have a competing process in there from, let's say, the sales and marketing side of things. They want to be able to sell as many places in your class as possible. They may not always care about the prerequisites. They just want a warm body in the seat. Sometimes this does happen. Ideally, it never happens. You have the perfect group of students every single time. Well, it doesn't always work that way. As a technical trainer, you just have to kind of work within these boundaries sometimes. Now, a suggestion would be to determine the prerequisites, examine the learning objectives, and determine what prior knowledge and experience is needed to grasp the tasks that you're going to be training on. Now, perhaps a pre-class assessment can be used to determine learners' levels of competency in the technology, and this could be a test, an exercise, or even an interview with the learners. Now, ideally, this should be done prior to the learner signing up for the course. Like I said, it doesn't always happen that way. Now, if you're using this technique, base the questions on course prerequisites. Don't come out with something that's out deep in some sort of tome of a book of knowledge or something that's very obscure. Base it on the prerequisites of what you want the students to have. If you're writing an exam or a quick quiz, write effective multiple choice questions. This can be tough. The idea here is comprehension, not memorizing long lists of things. So create answers that are about the same length for each question. Oh, and here's one that CompTIA also recommends. Use independent answers for your questions. In other words, don't use all of the above or none of the above. That makes it a little bit tougher to write some of these exam questions too. Above all, communicate the purpose of the assessment in advance. Try not to frighten your students. That's not what you're there for. Communicate to them that the assessment is only to determine where they're at. It's not their final grade or if it's being graded and so on. All right, Guy, would you please put up the next poll? I'd like to find out how many of you have had to put together learning objectives for a course.
Poll is up. For those struggling to find it, there should be a polls section in the interface. You can answer from there.
Okay, we've got about 2/3 of you, not quite 2/3 of you, who have actually written some of these. This is terrific. So about 60% of you have put together learning objectives for courses, and 40% of you haven't yet.
Okay,
perfect. All right.
good, I reckon.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll share that one up. There you go. And we'll hide that one too.
All right, thanks. All right. Now, let's move on to establishing goals of a course. Each course needs a clearly defined instructional goal or course overview or course description. This communicates the intent of the seminar to the participants so they know what they're getting into. Now, part of this would include developing the learning objectives. This feeds into the specific goals of the content, defining the exact application of the knowledge, and this should support the broader instructional goal that the training course is going to address. You're going to identify topical units. and break down the instructional goals into a topical unit. Here's an example. I am wanting to have a course put together, and one of the topical units I want is during this 1-week course is the ability for the learner to add the DHCP role to a Windows Server 2012 platform without any problems. All right, so there's my topical unit. That's part of the goals, the overall instructional goals that I want to have happen out of the course. Now you might want to have a look at the additional reading provided for further courses. I took some examples from the Microsoft course listings, and so you might want to have a quick look at those. Again, those are on the on our site. Now the writing of the learning objectives would have the end product of breaking everything down, such as the instructional goals, the topical units, and learning outcomes. And it focuses on the end results of the learning and how participants will use what has been taught. I mean, they're supposed to use it, aren't they? Now think about the training courses you've participated in. At the end of the training, were you able to effectively use the information that was stipulated in the learning objectives? I've been pretty fortunate. A lot of the training courses that I've attended have been very, very good about that. Now, an important product of this is also that it sets the expectations of the participants, and not only the participants, but the management, the human resources people, as well as the trainer. So keep in mind that there may be lots of rounds of refinement and buy-in from the organization to get to this point with all of the learning objectives, with all of the goals and so on. It does take time, but please be patient. It really pays off in the end, because that way your stakeholders, your learners, managers, HR, etc., will all be a lot happier. Now, prior to the beginning of your training course, you may want to measure the learner competencies, not the prerequisites, but the competencies. How good are they at doing what it is that they're doing? So this will assist in assessing learners on what they already know about the material, and also helps you as a trainer determine what you should be teaching. Now, a word of warning here. Be sure to follow company rules and your human resources guidelines when conducting this type of learner competency measurement. There may be issues that vary from country to country and company to company. I don't want you to get in trouble for this. All right, that brings us to the ADDI model. Now, as is listed here, the ADDI model includes analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation areas. You won't be tested in depth on each of these areas, but you need to be aware of the model from a high-level perspective. Now, this model is embraced more by instructional designers, but good instructional design makes training and learning more enjoyable for both you as a trainer and the learner. For the exam, be familiar with the 5 components of the ADDI model. And keep in mind that this helps us understand the process of instructional design. Remember, you are affected by how the instructional designers have followed the ADDI model recommendations, and it would behoove you to know a bit about it. Our first task, our first area is task analysis. This will include an analysis of how a task is accomplished. This includes including the task and element durations, how often the task has to be performed, how complex it is, the environmental conditions, necessary clothing and equipment, any other unique factors involved in or required for one or more people to perform the task. Now, imagine that you're supposed to be doing some training on a task that takes place outdoors in all weather conditions, and they maybe have to be tethered to some sort of scaffolding or support arm. Well, that's a bit different than if you're going to be doing some training in an area where it's climate controlled and everybody's going to be sitting at desks. You may have to worry about things such as PPE or personal protective equipment, that is goggles, face mask, rebreathers, etc. So the design of the technical training contains determining the direction and content of the technical training, and also includes efficient, effective, and appealing training. Now that word appealing kind of grabs my eyes a little bit. it does have to be professional, and it should be appealing to the eye. And this is where you may end up getting some graphics designers and so on to design some of your charts or some of your graphs or even posters and so on. So instructional designers will create a design strategy document that includes a few things, and these are the technical training scope, the constraints and assumptions, the overall course structure, and what the course context is. Developing the course material is always a challenge. Now, for those of you that may have done this, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't developed course material yet, it's definitely a challenge. It can be a lot of fun, especially if you have support. Now, the development phase is the actual creation of the course material. Now, course assets are dependent on the type of training, the duration of the course, and may involve SMEs, or subject matter experts, multimedia experts, copy editors, and so on, to put the course material together. Now, next is implementing the technical course, and this is where you, the technical trainer, will conduct the training. It may require you to adapt materials for learning styles. To teach more effectively, no class is exactly the same as any other class, at least that's what I've found. There's always some subtle differences. Even though I've taught the same class dozens and dozens of times, it's always a bit different, and quite frankly, I learn something from every class that I teach. Also, there may be times where a train the trainer course may be part of the implementation phase that you may be providing or you may be taking part in. So keep in mind that the trainer also should know more than what is promised to be delivered. As an example, previously I used the example of installing a DHCP server as a role on a Windows Server 2012 platform. Okay, installing it is actually pretty easy. But what about configuring it? This is where I have to have some knowledge about IP addressing. I have to have knowledge about subnet masks, possibly the 60/40 or the 80/20 rule. I may need to be able to put in disaster recovery procedures. I may need to back up the DHCP databases and so on. So you should know a little bit more, quite often quite a bit more, than what the book is that you're teaching from. Now, this is going to assist you in establishing your credentials with the learners, and also often assist in answering detailed questions or addressing situations that students might have. I can't tell you how many times I've had to answer questions well beyond the scope of a topic because the students brought something in from their workplace. And it's always kind of fun to do some brainstorming and throw some ideas out there for them to try. Now, of course, during the technical training, keep a log of technical or content issues, especially if it's a brand new course. There's often a disconnect between the instructional designers, quite often who have never trained, and the trainers. And whatever you do, please, please don't criticize the material, don't criticize the designers, and don't criticize the technology in front of the participants. Take that offline. Here's an example. For some commercial training products, like Microsoft courses I'm familiar with, keeping a log of content issues and submitting them to Microsoft for the Microsoft certified training materials often results in errata sheets being published for the courses. Those errata sheets are fabulous because we as instructors took the time, we kept a log of the technical content issues, we sent them to Microsoft, they collated them for us, and they sent them back out again to all of us instructors. And it sure made our life a lot easier. And later on, when a new version or revision of the course came out, they incorporated those errata sheets into the course content. I mean, it really helps an awful lot if you do log the technical content issues. Here's another example. Oh, this is a nightmare, complete nightmare scenario. When I was teaching a course put out by Novell, and we were covering network directory services, or NDS. It's kind of like ADS or ADDS from Microsoft. When you're dealing with that type of technology, syntax and punctuation was paramount. From what we could tell, someone came along and corrected, quote, end of quote, how things were spelled or punctuated. This completely turned the course upside down in a lot of areas. It was done with the best of intentions, but it ended up changing some of the course content, and we as instructors and students, we kind of got together. We made it into another exercise. All right, let's find out where some of the what some of the changes are that we need to make. And it didn't seriously disrupt the course, but it was something that we took the time to do. It was a learning experience and it was absolutely fabulous because the students really picked up on this. Now, finally, evaluating the technical course needs to be looked at. And actually, this should be done throughout the course and measures the effectiveness of the training, quality of the course, and the instructor's performance. It should be focused on how the performance, content, and the learner experience can be improved, but it also sometimes focuses on just the instructor. And unfortunately, if you've ever done course evaluations or you've been a trainer, where do those evaluations usually come at the end? And what do the learners really want to do at that point in time? They want to run to the door and trample everything on their way out. Enter Donald Kirkpatrick's 4 levels evaluation model. This is often used, and you might want to note this for exam. By the way, I think there's a link on our site for you to read a little bit more on this. Look for Donald Kirkpatrick's 4 levels evaluation model. Now, the first of the model is reaction evaluation. This is the end of class evaluation that a lot of us are familiar with. It's a feedback and course evaluation. Now, if this is only used, it should also include follow-up with the students if there are any issues. I know I've done this a lot of times when people would say that, oh, this wasn't working properly. I would follow up with them, or let's say an instructor wasn't as effective as I had hoped. I would follow up with them, find out why the instructor, or why they felt that instructor was the way it was. Now, sometimes I've also run into this where people thought 1 was high and 5 was low, or 10 was low. So they reversed their evaluation. So the instructor ended up getting very low evaluations, even though the learner wanted to give them top marks. Now, the second, of course, is learning evaluation. This is a before and after assessment of knowledge. The design should reflect the same skill sets and topics that are going to be retested so that you can see where they were and how far they've come. And don't make the exams harder or easier than the others. The third one is behavior evaluation. And this tries to determine if the course participants applied the learning and changed their behavior as a result of the training. This can actually take a couple of months to figure out. And sometimes it isn't very easy. For example, if you're looking at people who are using a software or using software, or they're using workflows, how do you measure that? Some might be a little tougher. And our fourth one is results evaluation. It determines the effect of the training to the organization as a whole. You might need to use KPIs, before and after statistics. Again, it's tough to do because here you're trying to find a direct correlation of what you as a trainer have done versus what kind of behavior has changed. It's a lot of material in there. Again, I suggest that you go in and have a look at the postings, and there should be a link in there.
Sure. Steve, just a quick interjection for a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Got a couple of questions on the CTT Plus exam. 90 questions in 95 minutes is a lot, says Glenn. How is the passing grade even possible?
The nice thing, good question. The nice thing about the CompTIA exams that I found, and this is from, including the Network Plus, including the A Plus, the Security Plus, and so on, is that they're not trying to trick you. They tend to be very specific questions, and they're not like some other vendors that I've run into where they try to give you trick questions and some very obscure answers. It's a pretty straightforward exam, believe it or not, and you may even have 10 minutes at the end of it plus to go through some of your answers. So that's always a worry, but usually you're okay.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, the other positive
thing.
Let me continue with that one real quick, Guy. I'm sorry. The other thing also is up in the upper right-hand corner of your exam, you'll probably have a countdown timer. So if you're on question number 12 and 45 minutes has passed, you're probably running a little low on time. So kind of keep track of what your time is. And quite often you're not allowed watches in the testing centers, so you'll have to use that.
just wondering, Peter Toby asked whether it was possible to take both classroom and virtual exams.
Absolutely. You can have both certifications, but that's 2 separate videos that you'll have to submit. And of course, 2 different fees that you'll have to pay as well too.
Of course. Also, just there was one last question concerning one of the polls. There was what sort of have you what technical training courses you're interested in giving, and there was a lot of other industries, people, for example, IT operations, marketing, policy, tax and accounting, you know, a very diverse range.
Wow.
And teachers. And there was a lot of questions as to whether, you know, this course is relevant for them, and can you just speak to how that would be relevant, and you know,
Absolutely.
whether the topic that you're covering is indeed transferable.
Oh, it's very transferable. Let's talk about finance. It's definitely not my strong point. I took one finance course through Charles Sturt University actually, and I got an awful lot out of it. But it really helps if you're having to do presentations to either finance people or non-finance people by keeping a lot of these things in mind that we're addressing. As an example, for the outcomes, what are you looking for if you're doing a course on, let's say, finance or accounting? What's the end result? You're going to take someone like myself who has 0 accounting background, and we're supposed to be able to fill out some basic sheets. All right, so our objective is have Steve be able to fill out this type of accounting sheet. Now, there's a lot of techniques in there. There's a lot of knowledge and so on that has to be conferred, or that the trainer has to know in order to confer that information to me. What was one of the other ones? Finance. What was another one? Guy?
Teaching, tax, accounting.
Teaching. Oh gosh. Now, it really. Here's where, when you're doing teaching versus training, as we mentioned before, there's a bit of a difference that CompTIA and some other pedagogies also take a look at, pedagogy and andragogies. If you're going to be teaching adults, as an example, or let's say high school students, there's still going to be that end result of the person needs to be able to write a Java program. Well, let's break that writing of a Java program down into basic building blocks. They need to put together, at the end of this portion or this lab, the hello world type of, which is a very common little exercise, regardless of its scripting. You have to put it together, hello world. The next one may be to train the students on the technology to put in, let's say, bullet points, or more likely select buttons. Maybe you're teaching people how to put together a Android program for heads-up displays. So you want them to use a Google Glass or Vuzix or something like this. So again, even though you're a teacher by trade, if you will, and by education degree, you're still really a trainer in a lot of these other areas. And I'm just picking on information technology again because I'm familiar with it. But you're still having the same outcome that you want for the students at the end of the day. So I think they're very transferable skills.
Great. All right. Well, any further questions I'll say for the end. We'll get back into it and sort of see how we go for time. Yeah, so yeah, take it away again.
Okay, no worries. Okay, planning prior to the course. Wow, this is the really fun area, I think. Our constant challenge here, I think, is that when you first start as a new trainer, you may make mistakes or forget things. And for the most part, learners are pretty forgiving. But it always helps to be well prepared and perhaps follow a checklist. Case in point, look what just happened to me. My primary internet connection dropped out for whatever reason. So I had plan B. I'm using my cell phone right now as a hotspot, and it works absolutely beautifully. So doing a little bit of planning ahead of time, following a checklist, having a plan B always helps. Now, to this end, let's take a look at a few areas. Management is our first section here. Now, first of all, we do need to look at the overall management This includes classroom management like room preparation to support the learning objectives. Now if you take a look at this slide, this happened to me. That's not me, by the way. That's not one of my students either. None of my students ever show up in ties. But we had undersized desks, undersized chairs. It was really a primary school classroom, and we had to use their chairs and their tables for a computer class. I think I was teaching Word or Excel or something. It was a difficult 2 days, and there was no other place we could go. So some of the classroom management areas that you might want to check include lighting, heating, cooling. Make sure it's of sufficient size for the number of learners that you have for the room. Ideally, the trainer should be able to walk freely throughout the entire room, and open aisles may be pretty handy for safety and moving easily to assist the learners. By the way, just as an aside, not really part of your CompTIA exam, but one of the things you might want to consider starting out with is having a safety briefing at the beginning. If you have cords, if you have cables, if you have things like this lying on the ground, then it always behooves you to have, or if you're playing with electricity, or if you're playing, well, not playing with electricity, but if you're being exposed to electrical devices and so on, a safety briefing always kind of goes into there. And another reason you might want to have open spaces that you can move around in fairly easily. Now also double check your for effective lighting. Sometimes they have these buzzing, these flickering lights, which just are absolutely crazy. And try to turn them out, learn where the light switches are in advance. So if you need to, you can always flip that one light off or a bank of lights to reduce the interference. Now, of course, there's different layouts that are better for different types of classes, U-shaped versus row versus cubes and so on. There's some references on the site as well too. I suggest that you take a look at regarding placements and layouts for different classrooms. Now remember, first impressions are important. So when a learner first walks into that training area, they're going to form an immediate opinion of the physical space. So keep in mind that part of management also includes guiding the conversations, the actions, and the overall learning experience, which we're going to cover a little bit later. All right, course logistics. This is similar to a classroom I've walked into. And I was teaching servers, Windows servers. Now, do you see a place where I can put the computers and the keyboards and the mice? Sure, on the table. What about an overhead view projector? Where do I put all the cables? This is a wonderful classroom for different types of training, but for the type of training I was providing, this was not the ideal one. Now, of course, course logistics can be problematic, and sometimes it's not always under your controller. Case in point, right here for this type of classroom. If it's not part of your role, you know, you're just sometimes often just have to work with it. And there could be issues where no training materials are available. That's happened to me. Computers aren't configured correctly. That's happened to me. Or even worse, nobody's even expecting you. I've been lucky. I've never had that happen to me, although I've had some colleagues that it has happened to. So to mitigate some of these issues, everyone needs to be aware of the exact location, the times, and the dates of the training. So keep in mind that you may need to be escorted. This has happened to me a number of times in several countries due to the sensitivity of the location I was training at. So you need to build in some time, get an ID badge, etc., in order to be escorted to, and then be escorted to the classroom. Now the first thing you will want to do is to check the overhead or the beamer, whatever you want to call it, with your laptop as soon as possible. Now finding out if there's any problems right away is at least going to give you a chance to talk with the facility manager and some time to rectify the situation. You may also want to check how your presentation will appear to the audience. Colors on a laptop may not be rendered the same way on a beamer. So test how a demonstration would appear. All right, here's an example. This is a Windows Server 2012 interface. I want to add a role, and what I would do is I would double check to make sure that this is actually appearing the way I want to on the beamer. Now sometimes they chop off the top, sometimes they chop off the bottom, you know, sometimes you just kind of have to do the adjustments so that as you're going through, you can actually see like the next portion here. You can actually, it's actually, you're able to see the different check boxes and so on. So again, it's always handy to check some of these things in advance. Now don't forget passwords. It's always a bit embarrassing when you can't access a device or software when a simple password is forgotten. As a courtesy to the students, be sure to know where the toilets, the coffee, drinks, prices, and lunch venues are. Now oftentimes a training center staff member will do this, but it doesn't hurt for you to have a good idea of where, of what is where as well. Now don't forget to find out who the technical support is and how to contact them. In our case, it's James. He's available in case Guy and I have some things that we can't quite overcome. So it's very, very handy to know who and how to contact that person. When conducting training, a few things to consider would also include using pictures when possible. So when you're in a classroom environment, you don't speak with your back to the class, and be sure to write in the top 2/3 or so of flip charts, boards, and so on for viewing. Now to support writing, etc., be sure to check the markers and the erasers before training starts. It's amazing. The magic pen fairy doesn't always check the pens and the pens, and they don't always magically appear when you need one. So make sure that you check the pens, markers, etc. beforehand, or you may just want to carry your own just in case. I've ended up having to do that after several training situations. All right, let's talk about death. Specifically, death by PowerPoint. Now, PowerPoint is really a de facto standard for presentation software in many companies, and PowerPoint can be the worst thing to sit through, but it can also be a really good tool. Now, here's a wonderful slide that has all the brilliant things you should put in there. Lots of words. Oh gosh, wait a minute. It's slide 12 of 934. It's also a slide excerpt out of Tolstoy's War and Peace. Obviously, this may not be the best slide to present. Keep the slide simple. Choose your colors carefully. Try to avoid like yum yum yellow as a background and bright pink bold letters for the foreground. Avoid the distractions of flashy animations unless it really helps your presentation. Be consistent with your animations if you really need them. For example, if you're always going to use fly in from the left, always use fly in from the left. Don't have text, charts, images coming in from all over directions. Your presentation should tell a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and then the ending of the presentation. Try to keep the text to about 15 words per slide. And you're consistent with the other icons depicting labs, demonstrations, and activities. Now, I've exceeded the 15-word limit by a little bit here. So, of course, text can be a little bit boring, so you might want to try some photo art, screen captures. Try to add questions, some interactions, quick surveys, exercises, and so on. And, of course, if you're in a classroom environment, try to get a hold of a cordless presentation tool to advance the slides so that you can stand to the left of the screen and allows you to use your gestures and your body language. Always handy to be able to do that. Personally, I don't like using the lecterns that a lot of people have at the front. I just don't like using them. I would rather have like a standard table that I can walk back and forth to. But again, that's more of a personal type of thing. Now finally, you may be limited by the pen types, the colors of presentation software, the dress code, etc. So be familiar with these prior to showing up the training course. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're dressed in a suit and tie or very formal attire and you're going out to a manufacturing plant and it has a lot of particulates and everyone else is dressed in gear which is for that environment. You really, number one, you really stand out. Number two, of course, is it's just not appropriate for the people that you're going to be training. Now also, you may have freedom to add handouts. Sometimes handouts for post-class use or during a training session. So remember that they can be used in the class, although some people don't like to use them. I'm not a huge fan of handouts in most cases, or else I'll try to hand them out at the end. Now, if you can add posters to the wall that relate to the subject or other visual aids, like flip charts or whiteboards or models and so on, great. I really like Novell Network Course 200, which was networking technology. Novell put out some great posters on the OSI model, how to interact with other models and how each layer interacted with the ones above and below it. And my students really liked them as well, and they really referred to them often. So if you can get something from some of these vendors like Novell, like Microsoft and so on, it really does add an awful lot, I think, to the class, and you can reference it too. All right, that brings us to the close of the end of the session, and I encourage you to review the additional materials listed on our site. They may assist you with training ideas and what to do and maybe what not to do. Now, there is a homework assignment as well. I would appreciate your input on this, and the homework is as follows. Based upon the training you plan to provide as a technical trainer, what do you think the ideal classroom setup would be and why? So for example, what are the positions of the desks? The whiteboard, if you're using one, the exit points. Where will you position yourself in the classroom? So what I'd like you to do is post your classroom setup on the forum, and perhaps we can all learn something about you and your subject. Also, please, please, please state the subject of your training that you're going to be providing. All right, that brings us up to a very short Q&A. Guy, do you have anything else out there that I could address?
Just a quick recap on the exam. There was a question again about the pass percentage. That was...
I don't have the statistics with me. I can see if I can... They're pretty tight with those pass-fail ones. It's very similar to Microsoft. They don't like releasing those statistics.
Okay.
I like some of these comments here. Best trick is permanent markers on whiteboards. That's not funny. I've done that. Actually, when I was going for my Novell certification for my Novell CNI instructor course, I accidentally grabbed the permanent markers and wrote on their whiteboard as part of my evaluation. It was embarrassing.
There's a couple of questions about the practical exam, submitting a recording of the teaching. Does it need to be a real life class, or is it going to be a staged training session?
Ooh, it's supposed to be a real live class.
Okay.
Or as close as possible to it. I'd suggest you take a look at the some of the links that I put up there, and they do go into it a lot more. But if you can get the live class, that's by far the best.
Sure. And the questions, are they multiple choice questions?
Yes. There's no.
Yep.
There aren't any fill in the blanks.
Great. And we spoke about this earlier, but like a couple of weeks ago, but should we speak about the price of these exams? We've had a couple of questions about that.
The prices varies from country to country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather not go into the prices because they do vary, and I don't want someone to get upset from one country to the next country going, gee, that's so much less expensive than mine.
Great. All right. Well,
the links are in the additional materials section, so if, I would recommend that you have a look at those. There's some rather amusing videos there as well too, but I think they do bring out the point.
Great. Also had a couple of interesting points of feedback in just preparation for the course. Any dietary requirements, considerations with regard to disabilities have been some excellent points.
Oh, great! Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Considerations. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, keep on going with the feedback. Keep on posting in the forums about anything that you think might have been what could add to thinking on these sorts of things.
Yep. Yep. I think that's great. Yep. I'm seeing lots of. I'm just scrolling by pretty quick here, but I see some really good ones here.
Mm.
Here's an interesting one here, David. I'm sorry. There's lots of them here. I'm just focusing on a couple here. Are the certifications transferable between countries? Yes. Go to the cheapest exam site. Yeah, you have to worry about your train or plane ticket on that one as well too. Do you find using microphones during class delivery is better than not using them? I don't use microphones because of the class size. I can usually project pretty well out to my audience. Maybe some military background where I used to have to address over 100 people outside. You can post the assignment just about any time. Oh gosh, I got to scroll back here a little bit. I can't.
Yeah, a lot of questions. That's great, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we see any that we don't get to during the week, we'll make sure that we cover them off before the start of next week.
Cannot hear, lost audio. No audio here. Yeah, sorry, that was my take song requests. Sorry, that was my fault again. My apologies. I think I'll stick with this plan B here and either make that my plan A. Is CTT good enough for a Cisco trainer? I don't know. They're pretty, Cisco, a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine is a certified Cisco trainer. He had, I believe he had to go through a, I don't know, but I can ask him. If you post that question up on the forum, I'll try to get a hold of my colleague and find out what he had to do. But he was also a Novell instructor and a Microsoft instructor too, so he may have grandfathered into the Cisco side. How does this course compare with Certificate 4 TAE or TAFE? I don't know. There's some of these questions I can't answer. All right. Well, that's all I've got for this one.
Yep.
And thank you, everyone.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Steve. Again, with the questions, we just got slammed there with quite a few questions. There's about 350 of you out there. So again, if we have missed anything, we'll have a look back over the log. We've got the session recorded, and we'll post that up by the close of business Australian Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, so you can revise that one. Any questions that aren't dealt with, we'll get to before the start of the next live lecture. And yeah, any concerns, feel free to contact us on that email, shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au. But yeah, other than that, if you're done for the day, Steve.
I am, and thank you, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, have a good afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Cheers.
Thanks so much.